maybe the military wasn't for me anymore, and I wanted to transition back into the civilian world. What would I do? It's hard to take a job in the military that you don't have a compatible transition into the civilian world. So when I took my first job, I had a lot of IT people looking for high pay, high titles. My other end is I wanted to get my foot in the door. Being a Puerto Rican, I gravitated, I had other sergeants gravitate towards me to show my potential. So I had some great NCOs to really give me the direction what I needed. You're not living in luxury places. You're living on the base. You're living outside the base. You have a very controlled budget. She just couldn't handle a lot of the being away, the absence of communication. And there might be things we can't talk about. And it does interfere with the marriage. It's okay. It's okay to fail, but you adapt and you overcome and you move on.
Exactly.
And you do what you have to do.
Hi, and welcome to Veterans Corner. I'm George Hinestrosa, an Air Force and Army retired veteran of 25 years and a digital marketing agency business owner. Here on the show, we explore how military experience transforms into business success. Each episode features veterans who have built thriving businesses, sharing strategies that turn military training into entrepreneurial advantage. The mission is to inspire and equip transitioning service members with practical knowledge and real-world insights from veterans who've built their businesses in many different industries. And today's guest is Will Ortiz. Welcome to Veterans Corner, Will.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is awesome. Thank you.
Today's guest isn't your typical tech entrepreneur. Picture this: a special forces medic who could save lives in combat zones by day now saves businesses from data disasters by night. Meet Will Ortiz, a man who's traded his Army green for SQL green. But keep the same mission-critical mindset that makes the difference between success and failure. For nearly 2 decades, Will has been the guy companies call when their databases are bleeding out and they need someone who won't panic under pressure. As the founder of Database Associates Services, he's built his reputation on simple philosophy borrowed from his Special Forces days: action speaks louder than words. But here's what makes Will fascinating. He didn't just transition from military to civilian life. He transformed his combat medical training into a different kind of life-saving mission. Where he once stabilized wounded soldiers in hostile territory, he now stabilizes failing database systems for businesses on the brink of digital disaster. Thank you for being with us today. And so before we get into the entrepreneurial side of things, just take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about your journey as a young man entering the military. What was on your mind at the time, and what prompted you to get into the service?
I joined the military, Army basically out of high school. I actually started in a special high school program called split training, where after my 11th grade year, I actually joined the Army, went to basic training during that summer, and then went back to high school, completed my senior year. And then from that point, I went back into active duty and went to my MOS training. But during that year, while still in high school, I still did reserve training. So once a month, I participated in that. And it was a good thing that I did that. Coming back, a lot of people noticed a big change in me. Even in high school, I was an introvert kid, kept my shoulders down. I was tall, skinny, and secure. Coming back my senior year in high school, very proud, just graduated from Army basic training. I was confident, I feel I could take on the world. I had direction. So I definitely knew what I wanted to do when I got out of high school. And I followed through with that. I went back in, went active duty, and went to my MOS training.
So tell us a little bit, Will, about what branch of service you decided to join, even though I kind of alluded to it. But, just for the different types of people that will look, just so that they understand what your MOS was in the Army.
Definitely. I joined the Army specifically for the factor that what it offered. And what I was looking for is to do jobs in the military. If I ever decided, hey, maybe the military wasn't for me anymore, and I wanted to transition back into the civilian world, what would I do? It's hard to take a job in the military that you don't have a compatible transition into the civilian world. So hence is why I chose the medical field. When I did my time, I came out, going back to college and, taking up the GI Bill. During that time, what made me have a civilian job to keep me in college was being in the medical field and working with doctors. So that was my decision. I mean, I did look at the other services, but I was really geared towards, I had a love for the Army. When I was in high school, I was in the JROTC, it was Army. So I had two great JROTC instructors, a colonel and a first sergeant. Of course, they were retired. They were teachers through the school system, but yeah, they really were great. Gave me the direction I needed, the support, and so I stayed Army.
Right. So were they kind of like, did you see them as mentors at that point? Did they see them
Oh,
as figures maybe, or hey, I like what they're representing?
mentors. I saw two gentlemen, who did their time, retired, came back and wanted to contribute more. So they became JROTC instructors. So they left retirement just to do more work, put back on the uniform because they were wearing their uniform, and really impressed. I did JROTC during my whole time in high school. So, I was really committed to it. So I actually became an JROTC officer. I was an S4 first my and it's so, I really was really heavy into it. Really when the army recruiters were coming by and they saw my commitment, they kind of went right towards me.
Right.
And I laugh about this. I was a skinny guy. So I actually for the first time the recruiter used to laugh at me. I had to gain weight to join the army.
Wow.
Yeah, I was 5 pounds underweight. Yeah, being a tall guy, physically I was fine. Everything was just they wouldn't waver just that way to say no, we're not going to do it. You can gain 5 pounds. So it's funny when I went to MEPS, I was eating potatoes, trying to get that weight, and I made the weight by 1 pound, but they were behind me. They knew they saw how I was in JROTC, and they knew that I wanted to be in the army.
Wow, that's
So
fantastic. Yeah. So tell me, Will, so before we move into business talk, what things stand out to you in the army? If you had maybe one or two lessons learned, maybe good leadership versus bad leadership that you may have run into as a young man now in the army, what do you feel, some of the things that stand out to you, because we all almost everyone I've interviewed always has that, we had good leadership and we had bad leadership. And people probably don't understand that at some point, right? But, do you have any experiences that stand out to you where maybe you were in danger, or maybe things that really like impacted your as a young man while you were in the service?
I would say, the way the army was at the time, be all you can be. That was always the theme. So it was always that you make out of the army what you want it to be. You are a career soldier. So that was the first thing. The second thing, I had some great mentors. Being a Puerto Rican, I gravitated. I had other sergeants gravitate towards me to show my potential. So I had some great NCOs to really give me the direction when I needed. Now, it wasn't perfect. Within any organization, you have good leadership, you have poor. But I would say with the Army, okay leadership or very strong. I never saw that it was poor. It's not the Army structure of having poor leadership. Okay, there is leadership there. It's either okay or you have exceptionally leadership. You got really good leaders, and that's what I experienced. And it was glad that I basically made myself appear that way, where I gravitated good NCOs coming, kind of lead me where direction I wanted to go, and I got promoted quick. They gave me a lot of advice. I did a lot of wonderful jobs in the military. I was always the thinner guy, so it was always a little bit hard for me, even when I went through all my training, Actually, when I went through my first swim test, when I went through special forces, I failed it the first time, because the weight was just too much. Now I adapted, I moved on. I didn't let that failure stop me. I learned different things to compensate, and I wound up passing. Yeah, it was challenging. In the Army, it was great because they tell you failure is it's okay. It's okay to fail, but you're adapting, you overcome, you move on,
Exactly.
and you do what you have to do. Even during my training that I failed, I moved on, I adapted, then I passed, in which was great. I took that learning lesson and moved that on into my civilian life. Like regardless of failure, I'm always going to strive and move on.
Right.
I'm never going to let anything stop me. And just having that training and that exposure, even the failures was great. It was fine with me. But then it's proudful. When I had my uniform on and all my successes and all my medals, I send back and I look in the mirror and people look at me, it's a sense of pride. Like, it really, and I'm young, I'm only in my early 20s. I have a career. I'm not out there like with the younger guys. I have a career. I'm a professional soldier. You see it on my uniform. I have the personality. It's a great feeling being a young man in the ultimate.
Let me ask you this, because I worked a lot with special forces guys. I was psychological operations, and here at Fort Bragg, I still live near Fort Bragg. The special operations is a unique environment, right? You have the regular army, then you have special operations, and then you have elite. Even more elite than that. But what part of as a net SF guy, right? What part of the training did you feel that had, because everyone has different thresholds for pain, right?
All right.
What part of that training did you feel whoa, this is, can I do this or can I not? What was the mental, uh, 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 just what drove you?
Yeah, what I did was, it was easy for me. It is when you read through it and you try to understand it, it is overwhelming. And of course you're like, and can I really do this? Do I really want to do this? I don't have to do this. This is extra.
The mental game.
Yeah. So I decided to take it piece by piece and not look at the whole thing. I just dealt with each part of the training. The one thing I was worried about was challenging was the swimming part, and other than that, I had great upper body strength. I was great speed running, quick on my feet, so those things I knew I had the advantage of.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, I took it piece by piece. That was the way I was only able to deal with it. I could, honestly, it was scary, you know, and then at the end, when you graduate, you feel good. You accomplish something tremendous. But yeah, but I had to take it piece by piece, honestly.
What advice would you give a young someone, let's say that is maybe in the service, because some people are in the regular army and then they transition into special forces, they apply to go into that program. What advice would you give, just what comes to mind that you would think of now if you had to do it all again? What advice could maybe give someone like that?
Understand why you're doing it. Is it, of course, when you engage in these special operations, you get extra pay because you get jump pay, combat pay, you get all this extra additional money, right? You get all this great training, get all this experience, yeah, language, everything. Do it if you're saying, okay, I want to be patriotic. Okay, that's great, that's nice. Okay, but that only can carry you so far. When you're actually doing this training, you have your face in the mud. They're putting pressure on you. You have someone yelling at you, pushing you harder. They're trying to work as a team. You have to have a bigger drive other than being patriotic or just, hey, I'm gonna wear a green beret. I'm gonna have a fancy uniform on. You have to. What is that drive? Why are you doing it? Because after you're done with the training, there's more after that. Because now you have to do the job.
Right.
Now you're gonna be operational. Okay. Now it gets serious.
Another story.
Yeah. So now you're talking about putting your life, you know, putting your life out there. It gets real fight smothers. You know, and when you're out there, you in combat, when you're out there, you really have to be real with yourself. why you're doing this. Outside, again, fancy uniform, being patriotic, you really have to have a bigger drive. With me was the camaraderie with the others, or trusting, having that small group, having that extra training, that exposure was great. Having those things that a normal army soldier wouldn't get, those opportunities, which I carried on to my personal life, learning different languages, self defense, you know, learning how to use weapons, stuff like that. Believe it or not, you carry that into your personal life, and it's great experience. But again, sit down and think, why are you doing it? Think hard about it, because even doing that pre-qualifications, step back and say, am I really ready for this? It's not a physical thing. Move beyond that. It's really not a physical thing. It's
a mental thing.
yeah, and you really got to get yourself ready, because I've seen guys much bigger than me just bail out,
Feel out.
really. And it's not because they were physically stressed. It was more of a mental. They just really couldn't
Right.
take much more.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works. Yeah, it's not just definitely not a physical thing, because the body will take a lot of punishment, but if your mind can't look past that, you get, you psych yourself out.
Yes,
And that happens in real life, and in this situation of real life, correct?
correct. You take challenges. You have to be, even when I run my company, when I face most difficulties, I have to psych myself out. I'm knowledgeable, I'm capable, I've been doing this for a long time, but now I still have to be mentally prepared to deal with some of the most difficult things I'm dealing with. I deal with companies that have failures in their database systems that cost them millions of dollars. That's at stake, and I have to be mentally prepared to manage that without it affecting my ability to work. And that's the same thing going through that type of training, that type of experience. You really have to psych yourself out. Am I really prepared for this?
Right.
And then that's why I recommend just sit down and just talk it over with your family. That's another big thing, because you got to understand there's going to be parts in your life you're not going to be communicating the way you're going to be communicating with your family and loved ones. There are going to be gaps in those communications. You're going to put yourself in harm's way. You might have a wife, you might have children. Understand.
Let's talk about that for a second then. Well, because unfortunately, right, I say because I've been blessed, but many people have not been able to maintain a family, or have been divorced once at least, maybe some of people twice, during their military career. And this is sad. Um, did you have a family at the time? Did you make a family while you were in the service, or did you have a family going in?
I married while I was in. Yes, it is very difficult. Um, your spouse doesn't go through basic training.
Right.
They're basically thrown into a military space that is set a particular way. And you have to come in and adapt immediately. There's no transition for spouses.
Right.
I wish there was a spouse basic training. The spouses went through nothing similar to what the military did, but saw a transition, and gearing,
Mental transition.
yeah, and giving the spouse the ability to say, do I really want to engage in a marriage with someone who is going through this? Because a lot of times the spouse doesn't know what you go through.
Right.
And a lot of times when we come home, we don't talk about it, or when I come home, we're angry or we're upset, and there might be things we can't talk about, and it does interfere with the marriage. Two, the biggest thing is you don't get rich in the military. Okay, so you got a controlled budget. You're not living in luxury places. You're living on the base. You're living outside the base. You have a very controlled budget. So that's another understanding those finances, because that's the big thing of divorce, is not having those proper finances in place. Two, understanding the absence. We're all deployable, and understanding that, hey, I might be away for some time, and there might be periods of time I can't talk to you. My spouse at the time wasn't. She just couldn't handle a lot of the being away, the absence of communication. Sometimes I come back, and you could tell I had that's stuck on my shoulder. I had experienced things, and you just sometimes you just can't talk about it.
And verbalize it. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Or
it's
it's
hard to
not appropriate to verbalize it. Right.
right, and, and especially a person who might not fully understand or, one thing we don't wanna do is explain things to a person who doesn't fully understand what we go through and then be judged. That's the hardest thing, and especially if it's your spouse and she looks at you strange, like, "I was doing this and I had to do this, or I wound up doing that," and they look at you like so, it's a little bit, harder undertaking, but, um if you find the right one, and you do get married, soldiers, listen, just be patient. Understand that they don't have the same training that you do. Be compassionate, um, and just give them the avenues that they're going to need to cope you being away. Because every military base has different programs. They have different groups. They have wife groups. Get them involved in that.
Family readiness group.
Yeah. So, don't let them alone. That's the worst thing. Get them friends, other soldiers, wives, or husbands, because it'd be a woman who's in the military who was married to a man, or woman, whatever, so, but get that person involved with other groups and other spouses.
Right.
Just don't leave them alone. I made that mistake.
Yeah. And I think we all to some point because, when you're in it, it's hindsight, here we are talking about it. And, this show is exactly for that, right? It's so that, service members can watch it, transitioning people can watch it and hear real stories and and be able to relate in some way, shape, or form to reality, right? It's not just a fantasy world out there or coolness as you mentioned, right? So, Will, so tell me, at what point in your service did you start looking forward? Did you start feeling okay? Here I am. This is fantastic. I love serving my country. I'm doing. At what point did your psyche start kicking in and saying, "Well, am I going to prepare for the future? What am I going to do? How am I going to? What's my next move?" At what point did you have that mental dialogue?
I would say about I was creeping on 10 years in. I had a close friend who was a staff sergeant. He was retiring. He was a few years, again, longer than I was. And, I asked him what was he going to do. He was like, oh, I'm just going to go work for the post office. You know, okay, well, that's fine. That's another government job. And it's secured. And it's pretty, at the time, pretty structured like the military, which makes us very, soldiers, you know, I only speak for soldiers because I was in the army, very comfortable with that structure. We are.
Right.
Then I had another close friend who was a sergeant first class too, and he was retiring, but he was going to go in and sell insurance. Okay, well he's getting his military pay, which is fine, but then he was going to go out and start selling insurance. I sat back and I was like, at my 10-year mark, I'm like, okay, well, what options do I have? If I retire and be 39 years old, I'm still going to be young. You know, do I stay in past 20 years and okay, maybe, I do my 10 years and longer, or do I get out and do more? Because, I'm not saying being a postal service worker was bad or selling insurance was a bad. I just wanted more for myself, So here I am thinking I'm going to be 39. What's next?
Hmm.
So I had the GI Bill. I started thinking about, okay, maybe I just go back to college. I had been in college while in the military because that's one of the things that get promotion points is at the time, you have to go and do college. And I did that. What next? So I decided to leave, which was regretful. I did have people push me not to leave.
Right.
Okay. I actually had a full bird colonel actually try to block me from leaving.
Yeah. I would as mad. There's a lot of training an AIDS.
Training, the money, yeah, everything I've done, he felt that I was really making a mistake. Um, And I respect that, I respect that what he saw in me. Um, but I explained to him I wanted more after 39. You know, eventually I did want a family. I did want a successful life. I wanted more. You know,
Right.
so I decided I got out. I used my GI Bill, and I went to college. It's great. I went to college full time, and because I had that special training, I had a job on the side. So I started working in the medical field.
Okay.
And I was a retinal angiographer.
What is that? Well,
Well, I inject special dyes into the bloodstream, and I take photographs of inside the eye.
oh,
And I work with retinal ophthalmologists.
oh,
So I did that, paying the bills, paying my rent, plus I can go to college.
sure.
And I did that for a short time. And then after I graduated from college, I settled in with my first IT job 25 years ago. You know, and rest is history. And the most important thing, because I've learned from the military, I understood going in bottom and working my way up. I knew how important that was. So when I took my first job, I had a lot of IT people looking for high pay, high titles. My other end is I wanted to get my foot in the door. I got low pay. I got a basic IT title, and I worked my way. I did the same thing I did in the Army and worked my way up.
Earning it.
Exactly. Every step. No excuses, no crying. Didn't focus on pay, focused on the job and building a reputation, building my knowledge as an IT professional. And that was my focal point. And 25 years later, I own two IT companies.
So tell me, so when you got into, not, obviously when you got into the IT, you weren't thinking you were going to be the guy, right? In IT, you were going into that field. What were some of the mental gymnastics that you brought from the military, and as you transitioned and went into the medical field for a little while and jumping into the IT? Um, what challenges that you could relate to the audience? Maybe what were some of the strange things maybe you had to deal with? That sometimes the unknown, right? What was some of those tunnel vision? You got to see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? So,
Right. It was, I had some, because of the Army, I had such a strong drive.
mm,
And going into the private sector, a lot of people don't have that type of drive,
right,
and they don't know how to adapt to it, because I took the bull by the horns. Good or bad environments I worked in, they were mine. It was really hard for them to understand that factor of, you're going to accept this bad. It's horrible. This whole environment is bad. You're going to take it on. Yeah. They didn't understand that. You don't have any problem, any questions? No. Okay. You're just going to yeah. And I managed it and I made it better. No complaining, no arguing. I did what I have to do the job.
hmm
That's where the Army came in. But it was really a hard thing on the civilian side to understand what that drive is. Didn't have to complain. You're not complaining? No. They didn't understand that. A person not complaining, just doing the job,
right.
you know? That was the hardest thing. The biggest, hardest thing is calling everyone sir or ma'am.
Sure. And they say, hey, you don't have to do that, right? You don't have to come, or you don't have to call me. Just call me by my first name, or yes, sir.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the hardest thing. And it didn't matter who I addressed. It was always sir or ma'am. And that was, honestly, that is a big transition, because a lot of people in the civilian side is like, I'm not sure. Like the son who owns the company. My dad is the sir. I'm just Jin. I'm like, I can't. I'm sorry. Sorry, sir. I can't do that.
Yeah.
That was the hardest part of the transition, but
Thing, right? It's
not at all.
really a respect thing. It's not, and some people feel like, oh, whatever. But Again, it has to do with upbringing, the way you're brought up in the household. A lot of that respect, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Sometimes it's not even a military thing, right? Res- it's just an etiquette thing, right? That either you have it or you don't, I guess, right? So, so you're an IT guy now, and you're working your way through, and you're like you said, you grab the bull by the horns. At one point, did Will, the individuals, start to say, okay, my business, it's my business. I need to start now. It's my business. Now I'm not just working in IT. I am going to take and make it my own business.
Right. So I would say I must have been in IT working. I was a W-2, so I was an employee for a lot of these companies. So, I had the titles, had the reputation, had the experience, the exposure. And then I was at the transition after 15 years. Again, like when after 10 years in the army, what next? I wanted more. And what was that? Okay. Well, the more was, well, you have the ability, you have the knowledge, you have the reputation, start your own business. So in 2015, I said, okay, start Database Associates. Hustled my first contract, and keep in mind, I was still working W-2. So I was running my new company, and still working for someone.
Right.
So very stressful, but I could handle it. I'm Army. I had a problem. So I took the bull by the horn and did my regular W-2 job, and then running my company. So the first contract came in, great. Second one came in, even better, and it just started flowing. A year after I started the company, I stopped my W-2 employee. I was no longer working for anyone. I was now working for myself
Only year. That's incredible.
after a year, and it was because of the Army. It's because of that drive. I really wanted more. I really was committed to it, and I didn't take no excuses, no sorries, no excuses. I just did it.
Let me ask you this, Will, and it's a caveat to what you're, and I don't want to lose track here. I don't- did you have a network of maybe of individuals? Did you have a small group or something? Because obviously we talk about that in being in the military. You're always part of something, right? You're small of a group of a. Um, did you have that during that year before? Did you, or were you just on your own, like out? You mean like land navigation? You're out there on your own, right? You just got the map. You've got a compass. You've got some water with you, and that's were you kind of do I was
On my own. Yes, I didn't have a group of other soldiers, helping me, massaging me, guiding me through this. It was me. I was basically taking it on myself, my own directions, my path. Again, from my experience from being in the military. Sometimes, we've learned to work as a team, but we've always taught to be able to work individually and become very effective. So, and that's where SF comes into play. Yeah, we're a small group, but we also are taught, hey, you might be a time you might be alone. You still have to function. And that's what I learned here. Now I functioned. I did it on my own. Now it would have been nice to have a group support. I mean, honestly, we all have some level of regrets. We still have to deal with some pain. I had some bad days, some good days personally. I could tell you it's not perfect. There are things that still trigger me. And during that transition with that high level of stress, especially that first year working for someone and then starting your own business, you have a higher level of stress. Yes, some days were a little bit hard. I had to go back and reflect. I had to have some of my I call my executive me time. Talk to myself saying, okay, well, yeah, you did a job. That was fine. You had to do things, move on, you know, don't let things hold you down. You know better, move forward. And like I said, it's not perfect. But if I had a group, yeah, that might have made the transition a little bit easier to talk to someone and say, hey, I'm really struggling with something, and just talk it through, instead of talking it through with myself. It would have been nicer.
So Will, let me ask you, so now, 2 decades into this, 2 decades plus, right? And now you're obviously successful, you're doing what you're doing, you love what you're doing. So now after the fact, hindsight is 2020, do you feel that now, do you network more than you used to when you started? Do you feel that now because of the, obviously you have to mingle with people because if not, you get no business. But how important is networking? How important do you think that networking plays into a life of an individual, post military or now in civilian life? Is networking important?
Oh, extremely. I mean, even from just doing it from my company perspective, but just personally, just connecting with other people who have lived your life, gone through what you've gone through. Even so, connecting with others like myself who have businesses, done the same thing. So it feels good to connect with that same group. It also feels good to connect with young soldiers trying to get out, using these different social platforms. You know, they have questions, they struggle through things, or they've already are out of the service and don't have any direction. And I've talked to many through social media, through going over to the pub. People's like, oh, in the military, you're in IT. Hey, I'm doing this. I'm Can you give me some advice? And I'm like, or I'm looking for a job. This is what I do. And oh, sure. Because I've networked more, I've connected them with other people, and made sure that they had something, So yeah, having that additional um, social platform, those connections, especially like platforms like LinkedIn. Oh, huge. And just talking to people, connecting people on a professional level. And then even after that, you can get to meet people at a more personal level and then start talking about things. And what it is it's you don't feel alone, like, oh man, someone else is going through the same thing. They had the same experiences. I'm doing something right because it worked for them. It definitely worked for me, and it feels great that the decisions I made, someone else has done the same thing. Right.
It's funny, yeah, because like you just mentioned LinkedIn, right? And part of this whole thing is not only to, as we said in the beginning, is to give practical advice and maybe just shared experiences from different points of view, because everyone comes from a different upbringing, a different background, and we all have pain thresholds that are very different. And some people can resist more, some people break down, some people are better at one thing or the other. um, but part of, with LinkedIn, right? Part of this podcast, really, I want to gear it towards not only doing that and helping veterans, but also bringing veterans into a hub, right? Like we should be depending on each other. We should be uplifting each other's businesses. Like I may not need your business, or you may not need my services, but there's someone out there that you might need, right? And I think that as veterans and as military individuals, we should, try to come together, right? And because we are kind of, what they say, that the NCO is the backbone of the army or whatever, right? But as veterans, we should be kind of the backbone of our own experience, right? Like we all served we served this country, and some gave a little, some gave everything, right? But we should uplift each other, right? And we shouldn't always just say, oh, the veterans, are homeless, or veterans are this or veteran. No, there's a lot of things that veterans are doing that are great. And I think that those of us that have had the opportunity and the blessing of being able to express oneself in something that they can do, right? It should be also shared with others, and we should maybe help each other out, right? Understand? And that would also show the rest of the business, hey, oh, whatever. But again, sorry to get off track there, but it's something that I just feel deep down inside. I feel like we really should, not just during the service, but after the service, we should be, and a powerful a platform like LinkedIn you mentioned, we should be using that not just to make connections and put ourselves and our profiles out there, but we should be kind of engaging together, right? Coming together, what you uplifting. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, it's kind of stuff that from the heart, right?
Definitely, and I meet many, many, many different veterans on LinkedIn, and it's more uplifting each other, making that connection, seeing the different things that we do, we promote through LinkedIn, recognizing those things. I could tell you from my company perspective, I actually prefer hiring prior military. That's one of my things on, what the not necessarily requirement, but what I would like to see as an employee. I are if you're interviewing with me and you've been in the military, oh, that's a plus. You just got bumped to the top of the list
Right.
automatically.
Hmm.
Because that just shows me you have commitment. You sacrifice your freedom to do something for this country. No one asked you, you did it.
Right.
And that tells a lot about a person. So I want that person to be working in my company. So you get right on top of the list, but that should be a lot of companies. Honestly, they should really look at the us veterans as, wow, these guys and girls didn't have to do this. They didn't have to put their life up for this country. They didn't have to give their own individual freedoms up. People need to understand is when you sign that contract, when you're in MEPS, you sign that contract, you are the property of the United States government. You give up your freedom.
That's right.
And understand that companies should realize that that's a strength.
Mhm.
You should hire veterans that have that because that's the first thing you want to gear to. That's an excellent employee.
Mhm.
Now you could look at what else is needed for them to get that job.
Sure.
That could be the key point because even if they don't meet all the qualifications, I guarantee it, you make the investment, they will. Because that backbone, that training, that's who they are. That's who we are.
That's who we are. Right. Well, as we wind down, and I like to keep this, under the hour. Um, what if you from the heart now? What if you had anything really? And you've already shared a lot of great things, right? And I appreciate that. So, but just as we wind down the podcast here, is there anything you'd like to share with our viewers and people who will see this in the future? Is there anything, I mean, even if it doesn't pertain directly to veterans, but just in general, from a veteran speaking out, what do you feel you'd like to say just to put out there?
Don't give up. You're not alone. Really. If you're out there, you're homeless or you're by yourself and you think about taking your life, you're not alone. There are people like myself, like you. We're here to talk, help, anything. Honestly, anything. There keep that military strength, that personality. You understand that you're never alone. We are a special small group of people in United States, the greatest country in the world. Okay, we're a small dedicated group. Let's stick together. You're not ever by yourself, ever.
Amen.
Even that one moment of weakness, you're not. We're all of us are a phone call away, an email away, down the street or distance. We're here. Just reach out, and we're always willing to help.
Yeah. Will, thank you. And so we're just winding down here. We will put all your contact information when the video gets published in a few weeks. We have others that we're releasing as we go. And we'll put all your handles and a lot of your contact information all over that, so that you can share that with your people as well. But thank you, Will, for being with us today. It's been an honor. Again, thank you for your service. I think you mentioned this the other day. When you say thank you for your service, I think it was you that mentioned that. We should also say, how are you doing, right? Not just thank you for your service and leave it at that. We should ask the veteran, so how are you doing? Right? How are you in life, right? Do how are, and that really touched me.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, awesome, awesome.
All right, Will. So, okay. So, and then thank you so much again.